Hi everyone, my name is Taylor Murray and I'm getting my master's degree right now at Liberty University, and I also work in the Shepherd's office. But today I'm going to talk to you about a country that is really special to me. It's a country that I grew up in from the time I was 9 to the time I was 18. And that country is Japan. It's a country located in Southeast Asia. It's an island. And it is such a beautiful country and one that I will always love. So I grew up there, like I said, as a missionary kid. So I was born in Columbus, Ohio, and we moved there. My family moved there in 2008 and began working with some local pastors there to plant churches. But Japanese culture is so fascinating, so I just want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that I learned when I first moved to Japan. So in Japan, there are 3 alphabets in Japanese: hiragana, katakana, and kanji. So hiragana is the first alphabet that I learned, and this is the alphabet that you write most typical words in. So this is like a very, most similar to our alphabet that we use in the United States. The next alphabet is katakana, and this is the alphabet that you only write foreign words in. So my name, Taylor, would be written in katakana. And then the third one is kanji, and these are Chinese pictures. They look kind of like little pictures. It's what Chinese people use in their daily, in their language in China, but Japan also uses a form of kanji in their writing. And so when you read a book, even like a children's book in Japanese, you'll see all 3 alphabets in the same book: hiragana, katakana, and kanji, all in the same page. The food in Japan is so good. I miss it so much. A typical Japanese meal consists of rice and fish and something called miso soup, which is a type of broth soup, and the broth is a type of fish powder with a soybean paste. And so that's a typical meal. So you would have your fish, you would have a bowl of rice, and you would have miso soup. And you would have that for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. So as a 9-year-old, that was very interesting for me to get used to having rice for breakfast, and fish, and miso soup, and sometimes seaweed salad. My favorite meal in Japan was sushi, and sushi is so good in Japan. Every Wednesday, my family would typically go to a sushi restaurant called Kaiten Sushi. And so we would walk into the restaurant, and there were booths all around the restaurant, all around this big room. And there would be this conveyor belt that would kind of wind around the room with the little booths sitting on both sides. So you would walk in, you would find a booth, and you would sit down, and sushi would come along the conveyor belt all around the room, and you could just grab whatever you wanted and how many plates you wanted, and then you would pay at the end. So that was my favorite meal growing up in Japan. I loved salmon sushi. I loved scallop sushi. It was so good. A couple holidays that are really significant in Japan is New Year's. So in Japan, they don't really celebrate Christmas. Instead, New Year's is typically the really big holiday. Usually little boys and girls go to bed on New Year's Eve, and their parents usually sneak into their room that night, kind of like Santa Claus, and put money in a little envelope at the end of their bed. So when they wake up, they have a little surprise on New Year's Day. There's another holiday called Obon that is very interesting and is nothing like any holiday or festival that we have in the States. So during this holiday, most Japanese people believe that their ancestors, or the people that have passed away in their family, return back into the world. And so usually each house has lanterns outside, these lanterns are believed to light the way for their ancestors returning. Most Japanese people also go to the grave sites of their relatives that have passed away and put out food and water for them to come. So when these past relatives come back into the world, that they have light to guide them as they're coming into the city, and then they have food and water to drink from. So as a little girl, during these weeks when Obon took place in August, I would be walking down the street, or I would be in the car with my family, and there would be these huge festivals in the streets with people dressed in all of these colorful kimonos and traditional Japanese clothing with these big masks, and they would be dancing in the streets, celebrating the return of their ancestors. So that was a really, really interesting time that a lot of Japanese people hold to be very, very meaningful and important to them. So as I mentioned, I lived primarily in Hiroshima, Japan. And so, as some of you might know, this is the city that in 1945 was hit by an atomic bomb. And this atomic bomb immediately killed 80,000 people. And there are many, many different museums and memorials and different monuments, especially in downtown Hiroshima, where the epicenter of the bomb is located, or where the bomb hit initially. And so I grew up as a little girl, taking all of our guests that came from the United States and that had come to visit us to Japan. When my family and I would take them to these museums and these different sites, in order for them to see what Hiroshima and that the city's history was like. And it was always very, very impactful for people. But one story that I want to tell you is about a true story that happened around this time in the history of Hiroshima, about a little girl called Sadako Sasaki. And this little girl has a monument in Hiroshima downtown in her honor that hundreds of thousands of people have seen in the past decades. But this little girl was 2 years old when the atomic bomb was dropped. And she lived, and she wasn't initially impacted by the effects of the bomb. She was everyone in her family recorded that she was so happy and joyful and kind, and she loved going to school, and she loved all of her friends at school. But one day, when I think she was about 11 or 12 years old, she got dizzy and fell down. And her family took her to the hospital, and the doctors did a lot of testing on Sadako, and they found out that because of the effects of the bomb, which is the radiation that continued to just affect many people after the bomb, had affected Sadako in a really, really serious way, and she was diagnosed with a form of cancer called leukemia. And the doctors didn't have much hope for Sadako, and they told her family that she would probably pass away very soon. But many, many different stories record one of Sadako's friends. Her name is Chizuko, and Chizuko would come and visit Sadako every day, and Chizuko told Sadako about an ancient Japanese legend. And this legend explained that if she were to fold 1,000 paper cranes. I don't know if you've heard of origami, which is traditional Japanese paper, and a lot of Japanese children growing up, they learn how to fold these squares of paper into these beautiful different animals or paper boxes. But Shizuko told Sadako that if she were to fold 1,000 paper cranes, so a crane is a type of bird, so 1,000 paper cranes, cranes are considered a sacred bird in Japan, that she would be healed. And so from the time that Sadako was diagnosed with leukemia, she set out to fold 1,000 paper cranes. She folded and she folded and she folded and she folded. And she ended up folding 644 paper cranes. But sadly, she didn't make it to 1,000 and she passed away. But now in downtown Hiroshima, there is a monument that has been built in her honor. And it's of this little girl holding a paper crane. And her story has been so inspiring to so many people that there are cases of thousands of paper cranes all over the area where the statue is, where people from all over the world have sent in folded paper cranes in her honor. And so as a little girl, almost every single year, my family and I would go downtown and we would fold paper cranes and we would put them in the cases in her honor, just to remember her. But Japanese culture is so, so beautiful. Growing up, I would walk almost every day. So in Japan, my family and I lived in a very traditional Japanese neighborhood with paper windows and this traditional Japanese floor called tatami. And tatami is straw, so it would be a straw matted floor. So we lived in a very traditional home with very traditional elements to our home. My mom would, so in Japan there's a washing machine, but there's no dryer. So my mom would wash our clothes every morning and then hang our clothes up on our balcony to dry. And almost every morning, my mom and my sister and I would walk to a little vegetable stand at the bottom of our little mountain where our house was, and we would buy vegetables from a little older woman who lived in our neighborhood, and she was so kind and so warm and so inviting. And Japanese culture is just so beautiful in that way. It's a very simple culture. It's a very polite culture, and Japanese people value group being together as a group, and so and they also value looking the same. And so, for example, as a little girl, when I was 9, I would go out to the playground and I would meet some friends to play, and I would be wearing my jeans and my little pink sweatshirt, and all of the other Japanese kids would be wearing the exact same Japanese uniform. So for girls, it would be a pleated navy skirt with a white blouse, and for boys, it would be a navy pants and a white shirt. And so that's what Japanese children would wear every single day to school. And what's interesting is that on almost every single career in Japan, whether you work at a gas station or you work at a bank, there is a specific uniform that you wear for that job. And so it's very clear, just based on your appearance, what kind of job you have in Japan. But like I said earlier, my family moved to Japan to work with 3 national Japanese pastors to plant churches in Hiroshima. So Japan, the whole country of Japan, there's not a lot of Christians, and so there's only one half of 1% of Japanese people are Christians. And so the primary, or like the main religion in Japan is Buddhism and Shintoism. So in my neighborhood as a little girl, there was a Buddhist temple in our neighborhood, and many people would go there to burn incense and to give money to the priests. And as a little girl, I would wake up every morning to the gong of the temple bell ringing. So there are different shrines and temples like that all over Japan, and many Japanese people go and visit them to burn incense and to ask for blessing, and to give to give their money. Many people go because they have different sicknesses or illnesses in their family, and they give money so that the priests would pray for them so that they would be healed. And so it's very sad living in Japan and seeing so many people who don't know Jesus. I remember as a little girl, I would walk around the mall with my family. We would go downtown, and there was one mall in Hiroshima that we would go to with a Starbucks, so we would always go to the Starbucks. But I would walk around the mall, and my family would know that we were probably the only Christians in the whole entire mall of 5,000 parking spots that were always full. And it's really clear, just really clear walking around, that people are hopeless, really hopeless, and they're looking for hope. They're looking for something just beyond this life that they're living. And so just as a class, I would ask you to just pray for the Japanese people, that many would come to know Jesus. There are only a few churches in Japan right now who are committed to spreading the gospel, and there is quite a bit of persecution in Japan. I've heard so many stories of children or wives who were kicked out of their homes when they became a Christian. Their husbands or their fathers would throw away their Bibles and not let them go to church. But these Christians are so committed to their faith and so committed to the gospel. And so I would ask you just to pray that many people would come to know the Lord. And especially would you pray for the pastors in these churches, and for all of the church members who are trying to share about Jesus and the good news of the gospel to their neighbors and their co-workers. Would you pray that God gives them so much strength and courage as they just try to find different ways to share the gospel with the people around them. It's such a beautiful country, and I know from living there that God is already doing an amazing work. And so I'm so glad I got to spend a little bit of time with you today. If you have any questions at all, I would love to answer them. My email is T and then Murray, MURRAY 12 at liberty.edu. So if you have any questions, if you want to talk more about Japan and what it was like living there, I would love to talk to you, so just email me. But besides that, I am sending your teacher a little video on how to make paper cranes. So hopefully through this video, you'll be able to make your own paper crane to remember Sadako Sasaki by, and just think about her as you make the crane. Knowing that she made 644 of them before she passed away. So I'm just so glad that I was able to spend some time with you, and I hope you enjoyed this video. So thank you guys.